The briefing room smelled of stale coffee and gun oil, since Nora Brandt had learned to associate with decisions that changed lives. She sat in the back row of folding chairs, her Navy logistics uniform crisp and unremarkable, watching the mission brief unfold on the projection screen. Lieutenant Commander Henrik Voss stood at the front, his SEAL trident catching the fluorescent light as he gestured towards satellite imagery of mountainous terrain. "This is a straightforward extraction," Voss said, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who had run dozens of similar operations. "We insert at 0300, move to the target location, secure the asset, and extract by 0600. Simple in, simple out." Nora's fingers drummed once against her thigh before she stilled them. The terrain wasn't simple. Those ridgelines offered perfect overwatch positions, and the valleys funneled movement into predictable patterns. She had walked terrain like that before, back when her uniform had been different and her role had involved more than managing supply chains and equipment manifests. Chief Petty Officer Rafe Castellano turned in his seat, his weathered face offering her a polite nod. "You'll be monitoring comms and managing equipment accountability from the staging area," he said. "Standard logistics support. We'll keep you updated on our position." Nora returned the nod, her expression pleasant and professional. "Understood, Chief. I'll have everything ready for your return. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe military operations have touched your community in ways you never expected." The youngest team member, Petty Officer Garrett Finch, glanced back at her with friendly curiosity. "First time out with a SEAL team?" he asked. "First time in this capacity," Nora replied carefully. The truth was more complicated, but her transfer to logistics had been deliberate, a choice made after too many nights when the dreams wouldn't stop and the weight of lost teammates pressed against her chest until she couldn't breathe. Voss continued the brief, detailing extraction routes and contingency plans. Nora absorbed every detail, her mind automatically calculating fields of fire and danger areas even as she maintained her role as the quiet logistics specialist in the back row. The mission profile suggested minimal enemy presence, intelligence reports indicating the area was lightly patrolled. She had heard similar assessments before, back when she had been the one walking point through hostile territory with a rifle in her hands and her team, depending on her eyes and instincts. The briefing concluded with standard questions and confirmations. "Equipment checks at 2200, Voss announced. "Wheels up at 0030. Get some rest." The SEALs filed out, their conversation casual despite the mission ahead, the easy camaraderie of operators who trusted each other with their lives. Nora gathered her notepad, blank except for a few equipment notations, and followed at a distance. In the hallway, Castellano fell into step beside her. "You seem pretty calm for someone heading into a combat zone," he observed, his tone more curious than challenging. Nora offered a slight smile. "Logistics stays calm so operators can focus on the mission, Chief. That's the job." He nodded, satisfied with the answer, and headed toward the team room. Nora continued to her temporary quarters, her duffel already packed with the standard gear for her assigned role. But beneath the logistics manifests and communication equipment, wrapped in an old T-shirt, was her personal rifle maintenance kit. Just in case, she told herself, though she knew the chances of needing it were supposed to be minimal. The hours before insertion passed with mechanical efficiency. Equipment checks, final briefings, the quiet preparation of professionals moving toward violence with practice calm. Nora verified communication equipment and supply loads, her interactions with the SEAL team polite and minimal. They treated her with courteous distance, the way operators often treated support personnel, necessary but peripheral to the actual mission. At 0030, they loaded into the helicopter, the rotors already spinning in the darkness. Nora took her position near the equipment, her hands steady as they lifted into the night sky. Through the open door, she watched the base lights fade behind them, replaced by the vast darkness of mountains and valleys below. The SEAL team members checked weapons and gear with practice movements, their focus shifting toward the mission ahead. Voss's voice came through the headset, calm and professional. 20 minutes to insertion. Everyone stays sharp. Nora's hand rested on her thigh, fingers relaxed but ready. The mountains below held secrets in their shadows, and something in her gut whispered that this simple mission might become complicated in ways the intelligence reports hadn't predicted. She had learned to trust that instinct years ago, back when ignoring it had cost lives. But for now, she was just the logistics specialist, monitoring equipment and staying out of the operator's way. That was the role she had chosen, the safe distance she had put between herself and the memories that still woke her in the darkness. The helicopter descended through the darkness, the pilot's hands steady on the controls as the landing zone materialized below. Nora felt a familiar flutter in her stomach as the skids touched Earth, the sensation unchanged despite her new role. The SEAL team moved with fluid precision, each operator flowing out of the aircraft in practice sequence, weapons up and scanning their sectors. She followed last, her movements economical as she hauled equipment bags onto the rocky ground. The rotors kicked up dust and small stones, the noise overwhelming until the helicopter lifted away and silence crashed back over the mountainside. Above them, stars scattered across the sky with brilliant clarity, the kind of darkness that only existed far from civilization. Teams moving in 2 minutes, Voss said quietly, his night vision goggles giving his face an insect-like appearance. Brandt, you'll establish the rally point here. We'll maintain radio contact every 15 minutes. Understood, sir, Nora replied, already scanning the surrounding terrain with eyes that automatically identified cover positions and approach routes. The rally point location was tactically sound, elevated with good sight lines, but the valley below funneled movement in predictable ways that made her uneasy. Castellano approached as the team conducted final equipment checks. "You good here?" he asked, his voice low. "We'll be back before dawn." "I'll be ready," Norris said, meeting his eyes with calm assurance. The chief nodded and moved back to his position in the patrol formation. Finch paused beside her, adjusting his weapon sling. "Feels weird leaving someone behind," he said, "even at a rally point." "Standard operating procedure," Nora replied with a slight smile. "Logistics keeps the home fires burning while you warriors do the dangerous work." He grinned at that, young enough to still find romance in the mission despite the risks. "See you in a few hours," he said, then jogged to catch up with his team. Nora watched them disappear into the darkness, their movements barely visible even to her trained eyes. The night settled around her with weight and presence, the kind of silence that amplified every sound. She methodically established the rally point, positioning equipment and communication gear with practiced efficiency. But her hands moved through the tasks while her mind processed the terrain, the mission parameters, the instincts that whispered warnings she couldn't quite articulate. The first radio check came at 15 minutes. Team 1, rally point. Voss's voice crackled through the handset. "Position Alpha, all clear." "Rally point confirms," Nora responded. "Standing by." She settled into the waiting, the long stretches of nothing that defined so much of military operations. Her position offered a clear view of the valley below, moonlight casting shadows that shifted with the breeze. Somewhere in that darkness, 8 operators moved toward their objective, trusting their training and each other. She knew that trust, had lived it in another life when her role had been different and the weight of her teammates' lives had rested on her shoulders every moment of every mission. The second radio check came on schedule, then the third. Team 1 reporting target building in sight. Voss whispered through the static. "Conducting reconnaissance." "Rally point confirms," Nora replied, her fingers tight on the handset. "Be safe." Minutes stretched as she monitored the radio, listening to the careful whispers of operators approaching their objective. She heard the controlled breathing, the brief reports of positions and observations, the calm professionalism of men doing dangerous work in hostile territory. Her own breathing matched their rhythm without conscious thought, her body remembering patterns her mind had tried to forget. "Target secured," Voss finally reported. "Package is cooperative. Beginning movement to extraction point." Nora felt tension ease slightly in her shoulders. Understood. Rally point standing by for your return. But as she spoke, movement caught her eye in the valley below. A flicker of light, brief and distant, then another. Vehicle headlights. She realized multiple vehicles moving along the valley road with purpose and speed. Her instincts screamed warnings even as her logical mind calculated distances and timelines. Team 1, rally point, she said quietly into the handset, keeping her voice level. Be advised, possible enemy vehicle movement in the valley. Grid coordinates 379er, Fort Wait. Count 4, possibly 5 vehicles, moving north toward your extraction route. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before Voss responded. Rally point, confirm vehicle count and direction. Nora's eyes tracked the lights with the precision of someone who had spent years reading terrain and threats. Confirmed 5 vehicles, moving north-northwest along Valley Road. Current speed suggests they'll intersect your planned extraction route in approximately 20 minutes. Copy that, Voss said, his voice tight with new tension. We're adjusting route, moving to alternate extraction point Bravo. She heard the change in radio traffic, the clipped reports as the team altered their movement, the added urgency beneath their professional calm. The vehicles continued moving below, and Nora felt the sick certainty growing in her gut. This wasn't random patrol. The timing, the direction, the speed all suggested purpose and intelligence. Team 1, rally point, she said carefully. Recommend you consider those vehicles may have advanced knowledge of your operation. Pattern suggests deliberate movement toward interdiction. Another pause, longer this time. Rally point, Team 1, Voss replied. Noted. Continue monitoring. Nora kept her eyes on the valley, tracking movements and calculating possibilities with skills that had nothing to do with logistics and everything to do with survival. The simple mission was becoming complicated, just as her instincts had warned. Below her, 8 operators moved through darkness with precious cargo, and somewhere in that same darkness, enemy forces were moving with purpose. She recognized the pattern because she had seen it before, back when she had been the one trying to evade hunters who knew the terrain and had prepared their trap with care. The radio crackled with another position report, and Nora responded with calm efficiency, maintaining her role even as every instinct screamed that the night was about to become very dangerous indeed. The first shots cracked through the night air like breaking branches, distant but unmistakable. Nora's body reacted before her conscious mind processed the sound, dropping into a crouch behind the equipment bags as her hand instinctively reached for the rifle that wasn't there. She forced herself still, listening as the radio erupted with controlled urgency. Contact, contact, Castellano's voice snapped through the handset. Multiple hostiles, north side of the compound. We're engaging. The staccato rhythm of automatic weapons fire echoed across the valley, punctuated by the deeper boom of something heavier. Nora's fingers gripped the radio with white-knuckled tension as she listened to the team's reports, each operator calling out positions and threats with the clipped efficiency of professionals under fire. Rally point, Team 1, Voss said, his breathing harder now. We got approximately 15 to 20 hostiles. They were waiting for us. This was a setup. Nora's jaw tightened. The vehicles she had spotted, the timing, the precision of the ambush all confirmed what her instincts had been screaming. Can you break contact? She asked, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Negative, Voss replied. They've got us pinned in the compound. We're holding, but they're maneuvering for better positions. Package is secure, but we've got limited ammunition for sustained engagement. She could hear it in his voice, the calculation every team leader made when the mission went sideways. They had walked into a trap, and now they were fighting to survive against an enemy that had prepared the battlefield. Nora's mind raced through tactical options, her training automatically processing the situation despite her logistics role. Team 1, what's your assessment of enemy capabilities? She asked. They're organized, Finch's voice cut in, younger but steady under pressure. Military discipline, coordinated fire patterns. This isn't local militia, these guys know what they're doing. More gunfire erupted through the radio, close enough that Nora could hear it both through the handset and echoing across the valley. She grabbed her binoculars, scanning the darkness toward where she knew the team's position should be. Muzzle flashes strobed in the distance, brief stars of light that marked violence and desperation. Rally point, we need options, Voss said, his voice tight. They're bringing up more forces. Vehicles sound from the south. Nora's training ward with her role. Every instinct told her to move, to grab her gear, and provide support the way she had been trained to do. But she was logistics now, not an operator. She was supposed to stay put, maintain the rally point, coordinate communications. That was the safe choice, the role she had chosen to escape the memories and the weight of command decisions. Team 1, she said carefully, your best option is to hold position until you can create a break in their perimeter. If you move now in the open, they'll cut you down. We know that, rally point, Castellano replied, frustration bleeding through his professional calm. But we can't hold forever. Ammunition is already below 50%. She closed her eyes for a moment, seeing the tactical situation with perfect clarity even without being there. The team was pinned, outgunned, and running low on ammunition. The enemy had home field advantage and reinforcements coming. Standard doctrine said hold and wait for support, but support was hours away and the team didn't have hours. What's the structure of the compound? Nora asked, her voice shifting into a tone she hadn't used in months, crisp and analytical. Two-story main building, partially collapsed east wall, Voss replied. Courtyard with low walls on 3 sides. Why? Because you need to identify which walls give you the best protection and which angles the enemy can't effectively cover, Nora said, her mind mapping terrain she couldn't see. They're trying to fix you in place so they can maneuver. You need to force them to react to you instead. Brief silence on the radio. Rally point, Voss said slowly. That's pretty tactical thinking for a logistics specialist. Nora felt the slip, the moment when her training had overridden her careful distance. I read a lot of after-action reports, she said, pulling back. Just trying to help. More gunfire crackled through the night. One of our guys is hit, Finch reported, voice strained. Leg wound, he's still in the fight, but he's bleeding. The variables shifted in Nora's mind. Wounded operator, limited ammunition, organized enemy, with reinforcements coming. The equation was simple and brutal. Time to get creative or time to die. Team 1, can you reach the northeast corner of the compound? She asked. The collapsed wall section. Negative, too exposed, Voss replied. They've got that angle covered. Nora stared into the darkness toward the firefight, every muscle in her body screaming to move, to act, to do something other than sit at a rally point while operators fought for their lives. Her hand moved to her thigh, where in another life a holster would have rested, where the weight of a sidearm would have been a constant presence. But she was logistics now, and logistics stayed safe while others fought. Rally point, we're running out of time here, Castellano said, his voice sharp with urgency. Enemies consolidating for a push. We need something. Can you get to higher ground inside the compound? Nora asked. Second floor of the main building. Already there with 2 men, Voss said. But it doesn't change our situation. It changes your field of fire, Nora replied, her tactical mind working through problems despite herself. And it gives you time to think instead of just react. The radio went quiet except for scattered gunfire and heavy breathing. She could picture them in that compound, backs against walls, weapons hot, eyes scanning for the next threat. She had been there too many times, felt that same desperate calculation of ammunition versus targets, time versus options. Rally point, Voss said finally, his voice carrying new weight. When we get back, you and I are going to have a conversation about your reading habits. Those aren't insights from after-action reports. Nora's throat tightened. Focus on surviving first, sir. We'll talk later. If there was a later, she thought but didn't say. The night pressed down with the weight of violence and distance, and somewhere in that darkness, 8 operators and 1 asset fought against odds that were growing worse with every passing minute. The firefight continued in waves, periods of intense shooting followed by tense silence, as both sides repositioned and reassessed. Nora monitored the radio with rigid focus, her body coiled with the tension of forced inaction. Every report from the team painted the situation darker. Ammunition dwindling. Enemy reinforcements arriving. The wounded operator's condition stable, but concerning. Rally point, this is Team 1, Voss said, his voice carrying the weight of hard decisions. We're going to attempt a breakout to the northwest. It's the weakest point in their perimeter. Nora's mind immediately calculated the terrain in that direction. Rolling ground with minimal cover, at least 200 meters of exposure before reaching the ridgeline. In darkness with a wounded man, against an organized enemy with established positions. The numbers were brutal. Sir, that's a lot of open ground, she said carefully, trying to stay within her role while every tactical bone in her body screamed at the plan's flaws. We know that. Rally point, Castellano cut in, frustration sharp in his tone. But staying here means getting overrun. We move or we die. She bit back the response that wanted to come, the tactical alternatives that her training could see, but her position didn't allow her to voice. They were operators, she was logistics. They made the tactical calls, she provided support. That was the line she had drawn when she transferred, the boundary that kept her safe from the decisions that haunted her sleep. Understood, she said quietly. I'll have the rally point ready for your arrival. The team began their preparation, voices clipped and efficient despite the circumstances. Nora could hear them coordinating movements, assigning positions for the breakout, planning suppressive fire patterns. Professional to the end, even when the plan carried significant risk. Then a new sound cut through the radio chatter. Vehicle engines, close and getting closer. Multiple contacts, south perimeter, Finch reported, tensions spiking his voice. Technical trucks, mounted weapons. The tactical picture shifted from dangerous to desperate. Mounted weapons meant heavier firepower, the kind that could shred their position in sustained fire. The breakout that had been risky now bordered on suicidal. Rally point, Voss said, his tone flat with forced calm. Situation has deteriorated. We're going to need air support or a quick reaction force, and we need it now. Nora had already been calculating timelines in her head. Sir, nearest air support is 40 minutes out, minimum. Quick reaction force is at least 90 minutes given terrain and distance. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Copy that, Voss finally said. Then I guess we're doing this the hard way. What's the hard way? Castellano asked, but Nora could hear in his voice that he already knew. They all knew. The hard way meant fighting until ammunition ran out, then fighting with whatever they had left, then dying in a compound in mountains that most people back home couldn't find on a map. Team 1, Nora said, her voice steadier than she felt. You're some of the best operators in the world. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it's you. Appreciate the confidence. Rally point, Finch replied with strained humor. But right now we could use some divine intervention more than confidence. The mounted weapons opened fire, the heavier caliber rounds distinct even through the radio static. She heard the team scrambling for better cover, voices sharp as they coordinated return fire. The compound was becoming a kill box, and the enemy was tightening the noose with patient, professional precision. We're taking sustained fire from multiple positions, Voss reported, having to raise his voice over the background noise. Structure is deteriorating under this kind of punishment. We've got maybe 10 minutes before this building comes down around us. Nora's hands clenched around the radio. Can you move to a different part of the compound? She asked, knowing even as she said it that the answer would be negative. Every position is being engaged, Castellano replied. They've got overlapping fields of fire on everything. Someone planned this very carefully. The asset, Voss added, his breathing labored, says this was supposed to be a meeting site. He was the bait to draw American forces into a prepared kill zone. We walked right into it. Rage flashed through Nora, cold and sharp. Intelligence failure, tactical failure, all of it culminating in 8 good men trapped and fighting for their lives. She stared at the equipment around her, at the communication gear and supply manifest that defined her safe logistics role. Then she looked at her personal duffel, where her rifle maintenance kit waited beneath standard issue gear. The choice crystallized with perfect clarity. She could stay here, maintain the rally point, follow protocol, and watch good operators die, while she did nothing but monitor a radio. Or she could remember who she had been before the nightmares, before the guilt, before she had chosen distance over engagement. Team 1, she said quietly, "What's your ammunition status? Specific numbers." Voss rattled off counts that made her stomach sink. Maybe 3 magazines per operator, some already into their last. The wounded man's rifle was out entirely. Against an enemy, with vehicle-mounted weapons and apparent unlimited ammunition, the math was simple and unforgiving. "In your fields of fire from the second floor," she continued, her voice taking on a tone that hadn't been there before. "What can you effectively engage?" "Rally point." "What are you thinking?" Voss asked, but something in his voice suggested he was beginning to understand that the quiet logistics specialist might be more than she appeared. "I'm thinking," Nora said slowly, "that sometimes standard operating procedures don't account for every variable. And I'm thinking that you need someone to create a problem the enemy has to react to, something that takes pressure off your position." "You're at the rally point," Castellano said flatly. "You're supposed to stay at the rally point." "I am," Nora agreed. "But that's a recommendation, not an order. And recommendations change when the tactical situation changes." "Rally point," Voss said, his command voice cutting through. "What exactly are you proposing?" Nora looked toward the distant firefight, then down at her hands, steady despite everything. "I'm proposing," she said carefully, "that I stop being logistics and start being what I used to be. Before I thought I could leave it behind." "Rally point. Hold position," Voss ordered, his voice sharp with command authority. "You're not clear to move." "That's a direct order." Nora's hands moved to her personal duffel even as she responded. "Sir, with respect, I'm a petty officer first class in a logistics billet. I'm not under your tactical command for movement decisions. You need help, and I'm the only help available." The radio crackled with what might have been a curse or might have been an explosion. "Rally point. We don't even know if you can shoot," Castellano cut in. "You're going to get yourself killed, and us too, if we have to worry about you." She pulled her rifle maintenance kit from the duffel, then reached deeper for the items she had told herself were just precautionary. A chest rig, well-worn and fitted to her frame. Night vision monocular, older model but maintained with obsessive care. A sidearm and a thigh holster, the weight familiar and terrible. Things a logistics specialist had no reason to carry. "Chief," Nora said quietly as she began gearing up with movements that were muscle memory, "my last qualification score with a rifle was expert level, and that was considered a bad day for me. I can shoot." "Rally point. Who the hell are you?" Voss demanded. "Right now I'm the only chance you've got," she replied, checking her sidearm with practiced efficiency. "The enemy thinks they've got you contained. They're not expecting anyone to come from outside their perimeter. I can use that." "This is insane," Finch said, but his voice carried a thread of hope beneath the disbelief. "You're one person against what, 20 or 30 hostiles?" Nora pulled on the chest rig, the weight settling across her shoulders like an old coat she had tried to forget. 20 or 30 hostiles who are focused on your position and not watching their flanks. Who think the only Americans in the area are pinned down and dying. That's called a tactical advantage, and I intend to use it. More gunfire erupted through the radio, sustained and heavy. The building shook, another voice reported, possibly one of the support operators. "We've got structural damage. This position won't hold much longer." "Team 1, Nora said, her voice steady and cold. "I'm moving in 5 minutes. I need you to time your suppressive fire to cover my approach. When I'm in position, I'll create enough chaos on their flank that you'll have a window to reposition or break contact." "Rally point." "Negative," Voss started, but she cut him off. "Sir, you can court-martial me later if we all survive. Right now, I'm the variable the enemy isn't expecting, and in tactical situations, the unexpected variable is often the difference between mission success and mission failure. You taught me that." Silence stretched for 3 seconds. "You taught me that," Voss repeated slowly. "Rally point. Where did you serve before logistics?" "Marine Force Reconnaissance," Nora said quietly, the words tasting of old blood and older memories. 4 tours, various garden spots around the world. I transferred to Navy Logistics 6 months ago for personal reasons. The reasons seemed important at the time. She checked her gear with methodical precision, each movement carrying years of training and experience. The night vision monocular went to her helmet mount. Extra magazines distributed across her chest rig. A knife, small but functional, tucked into her boot. She was transforming from logistics specialist to something else, something she had tried to bury but never quite killed. Force Recon, Castellano said, and now his voice carried different weight. That explains the tactical analysis. But Rally Point, even with that background, this is suicide. Chief, I've done suicide missions before, Nora replied, slinging her rifle across her chest. Some of them I even survived. The question isn't whether it's dangerous. The question is whether you want to die in that compound or whether you want a chance. The radio went quiet except for the constant background of gunfire. She could imagine them in that compound, weighing impossible choices, calculating odds that got worse with every passing minute. They were operators, trained to assess risk and make hard calls. They knew she was right even if they hated it. Rally Point, Voss said finally, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that could end lives. If you're going to do this, do it smart. No heroics, no last stands. You create an opening, we exploit it, and everyone gets out alive. That's the mission. Understood, Nora said, feeling something unlock in her chest that had been frozen for months. The fear was still there, the memories of teammates lost and missions failed. But underneath, it was something older and stronger, the core of who she had been before the guilt had driven her away. Rally Point, Finch said quietly, what do we call you now? Logistics feels wrong. Nora checked her rifle one final time, the weight balanced in her hands like an extension of her body. When I was Force Recon, she said my call sign was Phantom, because I had a habit of appearing where I shouldn't be and disappearing before anyone knew I was there. Phantom, Voss said, testing the name. All right, Phantom, you've got 5 minutes to get in position. We'll light them up on your signal. Don't make us regret this. Sir, if this goes wrong, you won't be around long enough to regret anything, Nora replied with dark humor. That's almost comforting. She left the Rally Point with smooth, efficient movements, her body falling in a pattern she had drilled 10,000 times. The night vision monocular painted the world in green and gray, turning darkness into revealed terrain. She moved through shadows and dead ground, using terrain features the way other people used roads. Every step was calculated, every pause deliberate. She was hunting now, and the prey didn't know the hunter was coming. Behind her, the firefight continued its deadly rhythm. Ahead, the enemy perimeter waited, confident and unaware. Nora felt her breathing settle into combat rhythm, her mind clearing of everything except the mission. She had tried to leave this behind, tried to become someone safe and distant from violence. But some things lived too deep to ever truly leave. Some things waited in the darkness until they were needed again. And tonight they were needed. The terrain descended into broken ground, scattered with rocks and scrub vegetation that provided concealment for careful movement. Nora flowed through the darkness like water, finding the path of least resistance. Her night vision monocular revealing details invisible to the naked eye. 200 meters ahead, muzzle flashes strobed from enemy positions, concentrated fire hammering the compound where the SEAL team fought for survival. She moved closer, counting positions and assessing patterns. The enemy had established a loose perimeter with heavier weapons on the southern approach, exactly where they expected any relief force to come from. Their northern flank showed less discipline. Individual fighters spread across better firing positions, but with gaps between them. Professional enough to be dangerous, but not so professional they had covered every angle. Phantom, you in position, Voss's voice whispered through her earpiece, tight with tension. Negative, still moving, Nora breathed back, barely audible. 2 minutes. Copy. Be advised ammunition is critical. We're down to last magazines. She didn't respond, saving her breath and maintaining silence. The numbers were simple now. The team had minutes left before they ran dry, and minutes after that before the enemy overran their position. Everything depended on speed and shock, on hitting the enemy hard enough and fast enough that they broke discipline and forgot about the trapped Americans long enough for those Americans to exploit the chaos. A fighter moved across her path 50 meters ahead, silhouetted briefly against the stars. Young, carrying his rifle with casual confidence, focused entirely on the compound. He had no idea death was moving through the darkness behind him. Nora let him pass, continuing her approach to the position she had selected. A rocky outcrop that offered cover and good angles on the enemy's northern positions. Not perfect, but combat never offered perfect. She settled into the rocks with practiced calm, her rifle coming up smooth and steady. Through her scope, the world compressed to points of focus. 3 fighters grouped around a technical truck with mounted machine gun. 2 more spread along the low wall. 1 standing exposed, talking on a radio. The radio operator would be first. Cut their communications, increase confusion. Phantom in position. She whispered into her mic, ready on your mark. Copy, Phantom, Voss replied. Team, prepare for suppressive fire on my count. 3, 2, 1, execute. The compound erupted with gunfire as the SEAL team opened up with everything they had left, pouring rounds into enemy positions with disciplined fury. Nora's finger tightened on her trigger as the radio operator turned toward the sudden increase in fire. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The suppressed shot a quiet cough lost in the greater noise. The radio operator dropped, his radio clattering against stone. She shifted smoothly, finding the fighters around the technical. 2 shots, 2 down. The third scrambled for the mounted gun, but never reached it, her 4th round catching him center mass. The night vision showed her next targets with perfect clarity. She worked through them methodically, each shot placed with surgical precision. Not spray and pray, not suppressive fire, but aimed killing that dropped enemy fighters before they understood they were under attack from a new direction. Contact north, someone shouted in the distance, voice panicked. Contact north. The enemy perimeter began to fracture as fighters turned to face the new threat, momentarily forgetting about the compound. Nora kept firing, shifting positions after every 3 shots, using the rocks for cover as return fire began to snap through the air around her. The enemy had numbers, but she had surprise and training, and in the few seconds of advantage that combination bought, she dropped 6 more fighters. Phantom, you've got their attention, Castellano reported, fierce satisfaction in his voice. They're pulling back from our position. Exploit it, Nora said, dropping an empty magazine and seating a fresh one with practice speed. I'm going to keep them focused on me. She shifted position again, moving 30 meters east to a new firing point. The enemy was reacting now, organized fire starting to concentrate on her last position. But she wasn't there anymore, and her next 3 shots dropped fighters who had exposed themselves try to flank where they thought she was. They're bringing the technical around, Finch warned. Phantom, you've got heavy weapons moving your direction. She saw it, the technical truck's engine roaring as it turned, the mounted machine guns swiveling to search for her. Nora calculated angles and distances with automatic precision. The truck was armored enough that her rifle wouldn't stop it, but the gunner was exposed. She lined up the shot as the gun barrel searched the darkness, squeezed the trigger, and watched through her scope as the gunner jerked and fell. The truck kept coming, a second fighter climbing toward the gun. She put 2 rounds into the windscreen where the driver should be, and the truck slewed sideways, crashing into a wall. The fighter on the gun tumbled off, lost his weapon, scrambled for cover. Team 1, how's your situation? Nora asked, ejecting another spent magazine. Better, Voss replied, breathing hard. We're consolidating and preparing to move. But Phantom, you've stirred up a hornet's nest. They're sending everything they've got your direction. That's the idea, she said, finding her next target. You break contact while they're focused on me. Rally point Alpha, same as planned. Negative, we're not leaving you here, Castellano said sharply. Chief, yes you are, Nora replied, her voice flat and final. Because I can break contact and evade better alone than you can with a wounded man and an asset. I'm trained for this. Trust the training. She didn't wait for response, putting 3 more rounds downrange into fighters who were trying to organize an assault on her position. They were getting smarter now, using cover better, moving with more discipline. The surprise was wearing off and numbers were starting to matter again. She had maybe 2 minutes before they pinned her down, maybe 4 before they overran her position. Team 1 moving, Voss said, his voice carrying both gratitude and guilt. Phantom, you better make it out of this. I generally try to, Nora replied, shifting positions again. No promises, though. It's been that kind of night. She moved through the darkness, drawing fire away from the team's escape route. Every shot calculated to maintain pressure without exposing herself to concentrated return fire. Behind her, 8 operators and an asset moved through the night towards safety. Ahead of her, the enemy was converging with focused purpose, determined to kill whoever had disrupted their perfect ambush. The trap they had set for the SEAL team was becoming her trap, and she was running out of time to spring it before it closed around her. The enemy fire intensified as more fighters converged on her position, rounds cracking through the air close enough that she felt the pressure waves. Nora fired 3 more shots, dropped behind cover as return fire chewed into the rocks where she had been visible. She was down to her last full magazine, plus 1 partial, maybe 40 rounds total, against an enemy that seemed to have unlimited ammunition and growing anger. Phantom, Team 1, Voss transmitted, his voice strained from movement. We're 200 meters from the compound and moving fast. What's your status? Surrounded, Nora replied with dark calm, reloading while tracers snapped overhead. They're not happy with me. Might have something to do with the 15 or 20 of their friends I dropped. Can you break contact? Castellano asked. She assessed the tactical situation with brutal honesty. The enemy had closed the noose tighter than she had anticipated, professional enough to cut off her most obvious escape routes. They were moving with purpose now, no longer confused prey, but organized hunters who knew approximately where she was and were systematically eliminating her options. Working on it, she said instead of the truth. Keep moving, don't slow down for me. Like how Finch cut in. Give us your grid coordinates. We're coming back. Negative, Nora snapped, putting command authority into her voice. You have a wounded man and an asset. You complete the mission. That's an order. You're not in our chain of command, Castellano replied flatly. Fine, it's a strong suggestion. She fired twice more, dropping a fighter who had gotten too confident. But it's also the tactically sound call, and you know it. She shifted position again, this time to higher ground that offered better visibility but less cover. A calculated risk, trading protection for awareness. Through her scope, she counted at least 12 fighters still active, probably more she couldn't see. They were using fire and movement now, one group covering while another advanced. Good tactics, the kind that ground down isolated opponents through patient pressure. The partial magazine ran dry, and she transitioned to her last full one. 30 rounds against 12-plus hostiles who were closing from 3 directions. The math was getting uncomfortable. She dropped 2 more fighters with careful shots, but for every one she dropped, the others got closer. They had learned to respect her accuracy and were using cover better, making every shot harder. Phantom, you need to move now, Voss urged. They're going to overrun you. I'm aware, she replied, her voice tight. Trying to find an opening that doesn't involve dying. Smoke grenade, Finch suggested. Create cover and run. Don't have smoke, Nora said, firing again. Just frags, and they're not useful for the situation. Then what's your plan? Castellano demanded. Still working on that part, she admitted, dropping behind cover as concentrated fire hammered her position. The rocks were disintegrating under sustained shooting, chips of stone spraying like shrapnel. She had maybe 30 seconds before her cover was completely compromised, maybe a minute before they rushed her position and ended it through sheer numbers. Her mind raced through options, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. Running meant exposure and death. Staying meant being overrun. Fighting had already eliminated 20 enemies, but the rest had learned caution. She needed something they wouldn't expect, some move that broke the tactical pattern they had established. The night vision monocular showed movement on her left flank, 3 fighters moving to cut off her retreat. On the right, for more advancing with disciplined fire and movement. Dead ahead, the main force was preparing for a final push. They had her boxed, and they knew it. She could hear them calling to each other, coordinating for the assault that would finish this. Team 1, Nora said quietly, "If this goes wrong, tell Captain Thatcher that I'm sorry I didn't get to explain why I left Force Recon. Tell him the nightmares got worse than the fighting." "Phantom, don't talk like that," Finch said, young voice tight with emotion. "You're getting out of this." She didn't respond, focused on the tactical problem. The enemy was closing but not attacking yet, which meant they were still organizing. That gap between organization and execution was her window, measured in seconds. She pulled one of her fragmentation grenades, not for offense, but for something else entirely. Distraction was a weapon too, if used correctly. "Phantom, Team 1, we're at Rally Point Alpha," Voss transmitted. "Air support inbound. ETA 25 minutes. Can you hold that long?" 25 minutes. She had 30 rounds and 3 grenades against an enemy that would assault her position in the next 60 seconds. The math was simple and brutal. "No, sir," she said quietly. "I cannot hold 25 minutes. "Then break contact," he ordered. "Right now, whatever direction you can." "Sir, there's no direction I can," she replied, her voice steady despite everything. "They've got me contained, but I could buy you time to get clear. Make sure the asset gets home. Make sure this mission wasn't for nothing." The silence on the radio felt heavy with unspoken words. Then Castellano's voice came through, rough with emotion. "Phantom, it's been an honor serving with you, even if it was just for one night." Nora felt her throat tighten. "The honor was mine, Chief. Tell the logistics community they can have my coffee mug. I won't be needing it." She heard movement ahead, the rustle of fighters moving into assault positions. This was it, the moment when talking stopped and violence took over. She had been here before, back when her team had been caught in a similar trap and half of them hadn't made it out. The memory was sharp and painful, the reason she had tried to leave combat behind. But some debts could only be paid in the same currency they were incurred. Her finger tightened on the trigger as the first shapes emerged from the darkness, rifles ready, moving with the confidence of predators closing on wounded prey. She would make them pay for every meter, use every round with maximum efficiency, turn this last stand into something they would remember. If she was going to die in these mountains, at least 8 good operators and 1 asset would live because of it. That had to be enough. That had to matter. But before she could fire, before the final assault began, a voice crackled through her earpiece. A new voice, calm and authoritative and completely unexpected. "Phantom, this is Overwatch," the voice said. "Hold your fire and mark your position. Cavalry's arrived early, and we've got eyes on your situation. You're not dying tonight." Nora's mind struggled to process the transmission even as her body maintained combat readiness, rifle tracking the advancing enemy fighters. "Overwatch, Phantom, identify yourself," she said, her voice sharp with suspicion and desperate hope. "AC-130 gunship, call sign Reaper 2-1. The voice replied with professional calm. "We diverted from another operation when we intercepted your team's traffic. Thermal imaging shows one friendly surrounded by approximately 15 hostiles in assault formation. Confirm you're that friendly." "Confirmed," Nora breathed, barely believing it. "Marking position now." She pulled her infrared strobe from her chest rig, activated it, and held it above the rocks. The device was invisible to the naked eye, but would shine like a beacon to the aircraft's sensors. To the enemy fighters closing on her position, she was still just a trapped target in the darkness. "Phantom marked, Reaper confirmed. We have positive identification. Hostiles are danger close to your position. Recommend you get your head down and stay very still for the next 30 seconds. "Roger that," Nora said, dropping flat behind the rocks and pulling her helmet down tight. She had seen AC-130 gunships work before, knew the devastating precision of their weapon systems. The enemy fighters were still advancing, unaware that death was circling above them at 20,000 feet. "Reaper engaging," the calm voice announced. The night erupted with sound that seemed to tear the air apart. The gunship's cannon spoke with mechanical thunder, sending streams of fire down from the darkness with surgical accuracy. Nora felt the impacts through the ground itself. Massive hammering pulses as 105mm rounds transformed enemy positions into fountains of earth and debris. The fighters who seconds ago had been closing for the kill were simply erased, their advance stopped by violence delivered from above with terrible efficiency. The firing lasted 15 seconds, concentrated bursts that eliminated targets with methodical precision. Then silence crashed back, broken only by the settling of disturbed earth and the distant sound of the gunship's engines. Nora raised her head cautiously, her ears ringing, and saw through her night vision that the landscape had been fundamentally altered. Where enemy fighters had been advancing, there were now only craters and smoke. Phantom, Reaper, hostiles neutralized. Additional thermal contact retreating south at high speed. You're clear to move. Nora pushed herself up on shaking arms, adrenaline finally catching up with her nervous system now that survival was possible again. Reaper 2-1, Phantom. That was exceptional shooting. You just saved my life. All in a night's work, the weapons officer replied. Suggest you link up with your team before anyone else decides to crash this party. She keyed her radio to the team frequency. Team 1, Phantom. I'm mobile and moving to Rally Point Alpha. Apparently the Air Force decided to stop by. We heard that, Voss said, and she could hear the relief mixing with professional composure in his voice. Good timing on their part. Outstanding timing, Castellano added. Thought we were going to have to write a very uncomfortable letter to your next of kin. Nora moved through the transformed battlefield with her rifle ready, scanning for any remaining threats. Bodies and equipment were scattered across the terrain, testament to the gunship's devastating effectiveness. She felt no satisfaction in the carnage, only the cold acknowledgement that violence had been necessary and had been delivered with precision. This was the reality of combat, stripped of rhetoric and politics, reduced to simple mathematics of survival. The movement to the rally point took 10 minutes of careful progress through darkness, every sense alert for remaining enemy forces. But Reaper's thermal imaging tracked her movement from above and reported no additional contacts. The enemy had learned a harsh lesson about American air power and had wisely chosen retreat over further engagement. She crested the final ridgeline and saw the SEAL team in defensive positions, weapons oriented outward. Finch spotted her first, his night vision identifying her silhouette. Phantom inbound, he called quietly to the others. Voss stood as she approached, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Glad you decided to join us, he said with deliberate understatement. Couldn't let you have all the fun, sir, Nora replied, her voice carrying exhaustion beneath the forced lightness. The team gathered around her, their earlier dismissal transformed into something else entirely. The wounded operator, leg bandaged and supported by 2 teammates, nodded to her with respect. The asset, a thin man in local clothing, stared at her with wide eyes as if trying to reconcile the woman before him with the violence she had delivered. Castellano approached, his weathered face serious. Force Recon, he said quietly. 4 tours. That's what you said earlier. That's correct, Chief, Nora confirmed. He studied her for a long moment. Why logistics? Why give up operating for supply chains and equipment manifests? The question hung in the night air, weighted with implications. Nora looked past him toward the distant compound where this had all started, where good men had nearly died because intelligence had failed and the enemy had been smarter than expected. She thought about the teammates she had lost in similar situations, the faces that visited her dreams, the weight of command decisions that had haunted her until she couldn't carry it anymore. Because I got tired of writing letters to families, she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. Because every mission that went wrong meant I had to explain to someone's mother or wife or children why their loved one wasn't coming home. Because the nightmares got worse than the fighting, and I thought maybe logistics would let me serve without carrying that weight. And tonight, Finch asked gently, Tonight, I remembered that running from the weight doesn't make it lighter, Nora replied. It just means other people have to carry it instead. You would have died in that compound if I had stayed at the rally point monitoring equipment. So I made a choice. Best choice of the night, Voss said firmly. Phantom, you saved this team and this mission. Whatever demons you're running from, tonight you proved they don't define you. She wanted to think that one night of successful violence could balance the scales against all the failures and losses that had driven her away. But the truth was more complicated, painted in shades of gray that no amount of successful operations could completely clarify. Still, 8 operators and 1 asset stood alive because of her actions. That had to count for something. That had to matter. Reaper 2-1 is providing overwatch until your extraction arrives, the gunship reported through the radio. ETA on your ride home is now 15 minutes. Suggest you folks enjoy the peace and quiet while it lasts. The team settled into defensive positions, the tension of immediate combat fading into the watchful calm of professionals waiting for transport. Nora found a rock to lean against, her rifle across her knees, her body trembling slightly with the aftershocks of adrenaline and exhaustion. Around her, the SEAL team maintained security, but she felt their awareness of her presence, the shift in how they regarded her now that the truth was visible. The distant sound of helicopter rotors cut through the night air, growing steadily louder as the extraction birds approached. Nora watched the darkness with practiced eyes, counting the seconds between sound and visual contact. 2 helicopters materialized against the stars, running lights dark, navigation by instruments and night vision. Professional extraction, exactly on time despite the chaos of the mission. Voss stood, signaling the team to prepare for movement. Finch and another operator helped the wounded man to his feet, supporting his weight between them. The asset stayed close to Castellano, clearly relieved to be leaving hostile territory. Nora remained in position until the team was ready, her rifle still covering their perimeter despite the gunship orbiting overhead. The helicopters flared and touched down in clouds of dust, their crews moving with efficient urgency. The wounded operator was loaded first, then the asset, then the rest of the team. Voss paused at the helicopter's door and turned back to where Nora stood. You coming, Phantom? He called over the rotor noise. She shouldered her rifle and moved to the aircraft, climbing aboard as the crew chief secured the door. The helicopter lifted smoothly, banking away from the rally point and accelerating toward friendly territory. Through the open door, she watched the battlefield recede into darkness, the compound where they had nearly died becoming just another anonymous piece of terrain in an endless landscape of violence. The team sat in their seats with the exhausted calm of operators who had survived another night. No one spoke over the helicopter's noise, but she felt their eyes on her, assessing and re-evaluating the woman they had thought was just a logistics specialist. The transformation from support personnel to combat operator had been too complete, too professional, to dismiss as luck or desperation. Castellano caught her eye across the cargo bay and nodded slowly, a gesture of respect between equals. Finch offered a tired smile, young face showing the strain of combat, but also something else, maybe admiration or maybe just relief at being alive. Voss remained professional and distant, but she recognized the look in his eyes. He had questions that would need answers, reports that would need filing, explanations that would complicate her quiet logistics billet. The flight to base took 40 minutes. The landscape below slowly transforming from hostile mountains to secure territory marked by scattered lights and patrol routes. As they approached, Nora saw the base laid out in organized efficiency, a pocket of American order imposed on foreign ground. She had seen dozens of bases like this over her tours, each one slightly different, but fundamentally the same, all of them representing the same mission, the same commitment, the same cost. The helicopter settled onto the landing pad with mechanical precision. The team disembarked, the wounded operator immediately surrounded by medical personnel who rushed him toward the base hospital. The asset was escorted away by intelligence officers eager to debrief him. The rest of the SEAL team moved toward their compound, exhaustion visible in their movements despite professional composure. Petty Officer Brandt, a voice called sharply. Nora turned to see Captain Orrin Thatcher striding toward her across the tarmac, his expression unreadable in the harsh floodlights. The base commander, the man who had authorized the mission and monitored its near-disastrous progression from the operations center. She came to attention automatically, muscle memory responding to command presence. "Sir," she said simply. Thatcher stopped 2 paces away, his eyes studying her with intensity that made her feel examined and evaluated. "I monitored your radio traffic," he said without preamble. "All of it. The tactical analysis, the unauthorized movement from the rally point, the engagement with enemy forces. Your performance was extraordinary." "Thank you, sir," Nora replied carefully, unsure where this conversation was heading. "It was also completely outside your assigned duties as a logistics specialist," Thatcher continued. "You disobeyed Lieutenant Commander Voss's direct order to hold position. You engaged in combat operations for which you were not cleared or tasked. By every regulation and protocol, your actions were inappropriate." "Yes, sir," she acknowledged, waiting for the hammer to fall. "They also saved 8 American operators and 1 critical intelligence asset," Thatcher said, his voice shifting slightly. "Lieutenant Commander Voss has already submitted a preliminary report recommending you for commendation." Chief Castellano used the word heroic in his initial statement. Even the gunship crew reported that your tactical patience under fire was some of the best they'd witnessed. Nora said nothing, sensing that the captain wasn't finished. "I pulled your full service record while you were inbound," Thatcher continued. "Marine Force reconnaissance, 4 combat tours, multiple decorations, including a Silver Star for actions in Helmand Province. Expert marksman qualifications across multiple weapon systems. Advanced tactical training at several specialized schools. Then 6 months ago, you transferred to Navy logistics with a clean record but unexplained reasons for leaving combat operations." He paused, studying her face. "The personnel file notes suggest possible combat stress, though you never filed for evaluation or treatment. Your transfer was approved without challenge because your service record was impeccable. Everyone assumed you had earned the right to step back from the sharp end." "That's accurate, sir," Nora said quietly. "So the question becomes," Thatcher said, leaning forward slightly, "what do we do with a logistics specialist who turns out to be one of the most capable combat operators on this base? Do we pretend tonight didn't happen and send you back to managing supply inventories? Do we force you into counseling and evaluation? Do we court-martial you for disobeying orders?" Nora met his eyes steadily. "Sir, I'll accept whatever decision you make. I knew the risks when I left the rally point." Thatcher studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to go get medical clearance, shower, eat, and sleep. Tomorrow at 1400 hours, you will report to my office for a detailed debrief. At that time, we will discuss your future assignment and whether logistics is really where you belong." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Brandt. Whatever demons drove you away from combat operations, whatever nightmares made you think logistics was safer, you need to face them. Because tonight proved you're too skilled, too capable, and too valuable to waste on supply chains. The question is whether you have the courage to admit that to yourself." "Sir," Nora started, but Thatcher held up a hand. "Tomorrow," he said firmly, "get some rest. That's an order you can follow." He walked away across the tarmac, leaving her standing alone in the floodlights. Around her, the base continued its endless rhythm of operations and missions, preparations and deployments. She felt the weight of the rifle still slung across her chest, the unfamiliar comfort of combat gear she had tried to leave behind. Her hands were steady despite everything, her mind cleared despite exhaustion. "Phantom," Castellano called from the SEAL compound entrance. "You coming, or are you going to stand out there all night?" She looked toward where the team waited, their faces showing acceptance and respect. Then she looked back toward the logistics buildings where her desk and her safe distance waited. The choice felt impossibly heavy, weighted with implications that reached far beyond one night's combat. But deep inside, she already knew what the choice would be. She had known at the moment she left the rally point, the moment she picked up her rifle and remembered who she really was beneath the logistics uniform. Nora walked toward the SEAL compound, each step feeling like a decision being made without conscious thought. The team waited inside, gathered around a table with coffee and the quiet camaraderie of operators who had survived another mission. They looked up as she entered, conversations pausing as they registered her presence. "Pull up a chair, Phantom," Voss said, gesturing to an empty seat. "We're doing the informal debrief before the formal one tomorrow." She sat, accepting the coffee mug Finch pushed toward her. The warmth spread through her hands, grounding her in the moment. Around the table, faces showed exhaustion and something else, a shift in how they looked at her that felt both validating and uncomfortable. "So," Castellano started, his voice carrying weight. "Force Recon. 4 tours. Silver Star. That's one hell of a resume to hide behind a logistics desk." "I wasn't hiding," Nora said quietly. "I was trying to move forward." By moving backward, one of the other operators observed, not unkindly. "No offense, but logistics is where people go when they're done with the fight." She stared into her coffee, searching for words to explain what she barely understood herself. "After my 3rd tour," she said slowly, "we lost 3 operators in an ambush. Bad intelligence, worse timing. I was team leader. I made the call to proceed, despite warning signs I should have caught. 3 families got folded flags because I missed something." The table went quiet. Every operator there had lost teammates, understood the weight of command decisions made in uncertainty. It was the price of leadership in combat, the burden that never fully lifted. "4th tour, I was perfect," Nora continued, her voice steady but hollow. "Never missed a sign, never took an unnecessary risk, brought everyone home every time. But the nightmares got worse instead of better. Every mission, I saw those 3 faces. Every decision, I second-guessed myself. I was so afraid of making another mistake that I was becoming a liability." "So you transferred to logistics," Voss said, understanding in his tone. "Took yourself out of the equation." "I thought if I wasn't making life-and-death decisions, maybe the dreams would stop," she admitted. "Thought maybe I could still serve without carrying that weight. Turns out I was wrong about that." Finch leaned forward, young face serious. "But tonight you made those decisions again. Leaving the rally point, engaging the enemy, drawing their fire. Those were all life-and-death calls." "Tonight was different," Nora said, meeting his eyes. "Tonight the decision was only about me. If I died, it was my choice, my risk. I wasn't ordering anyone else into danger. That weight I could carry. Except you weren't just risking yourself," Castellano pointed out gently. "If you had died out there, we would have carried that too. Would have known someone died trying to save us. That's its own kind of weight." The truth of his words settled over her like a physical presence. She had thought she was escaping responsibility by going solo, but she had just been shifting it to different shoulders. The team would have carried her death the same way she carried her lost teammates, another ghost to add to the collection they all maintained. "So what now?" Voss asked, his command voice cutting through the moment. "Captain Thatcher is going to want answers tomorrow. You going back to logistics? Or you ready to admit you belong on the sharp end?" "I don't know," Nora said honestly. "Part of me knows I'm good at this, knows I made a difference tonight. But another part remembers why I left, remembers the cost of being good at violence." "Cost exists either way," one of the other operators said quietly. "Difference is whether you're paying it while doing something you're exceptional at, or paying it while pretending you're someone you're not." She looked around the table at faces that understood in ways few others could. These were men who lived with the same weight, made the same impossible decisions, carried the same ghosts. They hadn't run from it because there was nowhere to run that the weight didn't follow. They had simply learned to carry it together, to share the burden across shoulders made strong by shared experience. "Captain Thatcher said I need courage to admit what I am," Nora said softly. "Said I was too skilled and capable to waste on supply chains." "He's not wrong," Voss said bluntly. "Phantom, you're one of the best operators I've ever seen in action. Your tactical awareness, your shooting, your decision-making under pressure, all of it was world-class. The question isn't whether you belong in combat operations. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept that you belong there. Brave enough, she repeated, tasting the irony. I walked into enemy fire tonight. Pretty sure bravery isn't the issue. Different kind of bravery, Castellano said, his weathered face showing understanding. One kind of brave is facing bullets. Another kind is facing yourself and admitting what you're afraid of. You're running from guilt and nightmares, and that's human. But running doesn't make them lighter. Just makes you face them alone. The words struck deep, cutting through defenses she had carefully constructed over 6 months of logistics work and deliberate distance. She had thought she was being smart by stepping back, practical by choosing safety. But Castellano was right. The nightmares hadn't stopped. The guilt hadn't faded. She had just been carrying them alone instead of with people who understood. I'm tired of the dreams, she admitted, vulnerability showing through her professional composure. Tired of seeing their faces every time I close my eyes. Tired of wondering if I could have done something different, made a better call, brought them home. We all have those faces, Voss said quietly. Every leader in combat does. But you honor them by being the best operator you can be, by using your skills to bring other people home. You dishonor them by hiding from what you're capable of. She felt tears threatening and forced them back with practiced discipline. The SEAL team watched her with patience and understanding, giving her space to process what they already knew. The truth was simple, even if accepting it was hard. She belonged in combat operations not despite her past losses, but because of them. The skills she had learned, the lessons paid for in blood and grief, made her capable of saving lives. Walking away from that capability didn't honor her fallen teammates. It just meant their sacrifice taught her nothing. Tomorrow, when I meet with Captain Thatcher, Nora said slowly, what do you think I should tell him? Tell him the truth, Finch said simply. Tell him Phantom wants to come back. Tell him logistics is losing one hell of an operator. And if the nightmares don't stop, she asked, voicing the fear that had driven her away. If I can't handle the weight, then you handle it with us, Castellano said firmly. That's what teams are for, Phantom. Nobody carries this stuff alone. You've been trying to do it solo, and that's the mistake. We all have ghosts. We just carry them together. The conversation continued deep into the night, moving from tactical analysis of the mission to shared stories of operations gone right and wrong, of teammates lost and lessons learned. Nora found herself talking about things she had kept buried for months, the weight lifting slightly with each shared memory. The SEAL team listened without judgment, offering their own experiences in return, building bridges of understanding across different service branches and different backgrounds united by common experience. Dawn was breaking over the base when she finally returned to her quarters, exhausted but somehow lighter than she had felt in months. She showered away the dust and gun smoke, watching the water circle the drain and thinking about the night's transformation. The face that looked back from the mirror was the same, but something behind the eyes had shifted, some fundamental acceptance of truth she had been avoiding. She slept for 6 hours, dreamless for the first time in weeks. When she woke, the base was fully operational, the rhythm of military routine proceeding without pause for individual drama. She dressed carefully, not in her logistics uniform, but in clean utilities that felt more authentic, more true to who she actually was. The reflection, this time, showed someone ready to face difficult truths. At 13:45, she walked toward the command building where Captain Thatcher's office waited. Her mind was clear, her decision made not in fear or desperation, but an honest assessment of capability and responsibility. The SEAL team's words had crystallized something she had known but refused to acknowledge. Running from guilt didn't honor the dead. Using the skills they had helped her develop to save others, that was the real memorial. She knocked on Thatcher's door at precisely 1400 hours. Enter, his voice called. The captain sat behind his desk, multiple file folders spread before him. He gestured to a chair across from him, his expression professional but not unfriendly. Petty Officer Brandt, he said. Have a seat. She sat with military precision, hands resting calmly on her knees. Sir, she began, but he held up a hand. Before you speak, let me lay out what I know, Thatcher said. He opened one of the folders. Your Marine Service record shows exemplary performance across 4 combat tours. Multiple commendations, expert qualifications, leadership positions of increasing responsibility. Then 3 operators under your command were killed in an ambush. The after-action review cleared you of fault, noted that you made reasonable decisions based on available intelligence. 2 months later, you completed your enlistment and transferred to Navy Logistics. He looked up from the file. The official record shows a clean transition. But reading between the lines, I see an operator who blamed herself for deaths that weren't her fault and chose to run from combat rather than risk feeling that guilt again. Am I close? Very close, sir, Nora admitted. Thatcher nodded. Last night, you demonstrated capabilities that frankly exceed most operators on this base. Lieutenant Commander Voss's full report is detailed and glowing. Chief Castellano used words like exceptional and irreplaceable. Even the asset mentioned you in his preliminary debrief, called you the angel who walked through fire. He closed the folder and leaned back. So here's my question, Petty Officer Brandt. Are you ready to stop running? Are you ready to be the operator your training and experience say you are? Or do you want to go back to logistics and pretend last night was an aberration? Nora met his eyes steadily. Sir, I've spent 6 months trying to convince myself that logistics was where I belonged. Spent 6 months thinking that distance from combat would somehow make the nightmare stop, would somehow honor the teammates I lost. Last night proved I was wrong about all of it. She took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision, but also the rightness of it. The nightmares don't stop because I'm not fighting. The guilt doesn't fade because I'm managing supply chains. All that changes is I'm wasting skills that could save lives. Skills that my fallen teammates helped me develop. Walking away from those capabilities doesn't honor their memory. Using them to bring other operators home. That's the real way to remember them. Thatcher nodded slowly. That's a mature assessment. But combat operations will put you right back in the position of making life and death decisions, of potentially losing people under your command. How do you know you won't break under that pressure? I don't know, sir, Nora said honestly. But I know that breaking while trying to save lives is better than staying safe while others die. And I know that the SEAL team offered something last night I didn't have before. They reminded me that nobody carries this weight alone. That teams exist to share the burden, not to make any one person bear it all. Smart team, Thatcher observed. He pulled out another folder, this one thinner. I've been authorized to offer you a position with a Joint Special Operations Task Force that operates out of this base. Inter-service team, mix of capabilities, focused on high-risk missions in this theater. Your force recon background and demonstrated abilities make you an ideal candidate. He slid the folder across the desk. The position comes with your old rank structure, full combat status, and assignment to operations rather than logistics. It also comes with mandatory counseling sessions with our combat stress specialists, because I won't have operators on my base who aren't dealing with their trauma professionally. Sir, I accept, Nora said without hesitation. Just like that, Thatcher asked. No time to think about it. No need to consider the implications? Sir, I've had 6 months to think, she replied. 6 months of running from the truth. Last night, I remembered who I actually am underneath the logistics uniform. The only question was whether I had the courage to admit it. Turns out I do. Thatcher smiled slightly, the first break in his professional demeanor. Good, because that joint task force I mentioned, Lieutenant Commander Voss is the operational commander. Chief Castellano is senior enlisted. They specifically requested you for their team after last night's performance. Said something about Phantom being too valuable to waste on supply inventories. They asked for me, Nora said, feeling something warm unfold in her chest. They did. Apparently, you made quite an impression walking out of smoke with a rifle and a bad attitude. The kind of impression that makes operators want you on their team. He stood, extending his hand across the desk. Welcome back to Combat Operations, Petty Officer Brandt. Or should I say, welcome back, Phantom. Your team is waiting for you in their compound. I suggest you go introduce yourself in your new capacity. She shook his hand firmly, feeling the weight of decision, but also the lightness of truth acknowledged. Thank you, sir, for the opportunity and for pushing me to face what I was running from. Just bring your people home, Thatcher said seriously. That's all I ask. Bring them home and deal with your demons professionally, and we'll consider it a successful assignment. She left his office and walked across the base toward the SEAL compound with purpose in her stride. The morning sun felt warmer than before, the air clearer. Somewhere ahead, a team waited for her, operators who had seen her at her worst and her best and had decided she belonged with them. The nightmares would probably still come. The memories of lost teammates would still hurt. But Castellano had been right. Nobody carried that weight alone. Teams existed to share it, to make the burden bearable through mutual understanding and support. The SEAL compound was alive with activity when Nora arrived, operators conducting equipment maintenance and preparing for future missions with the methodical efficiency of professionals who never truly stopped working. Castellano saw her first, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile as he set down the weapon he was cleaning. Well, he called out, "Look who decided logistics wasn't exciting enough." The other team members looked up from their tasks, faces showing recognition and welcome. Voss emerged from the planning room, his expression shifting from professional to genuinely pleased as he registered her presence. "Petty Officer Brandt," he said formally, then smiled. "Or should I say, Phantom, welcome to the team." "Thank you, sir," Nora replied, feeling the rightness of the moment settle into her bones. "Captain Thatcher told me you requested me specifically." "Damn right we did," Finch said enthusiastically, abandoning his gear to approach. "Best shooting I've ever seen, and you saved all our lives." "Why wouldn't we want you on the team?" "Because I come with baggage," Nora said honestly. "Combat stress issues, guilt over past losses, nightmares that don't quit. Not exactly the ideal teammate profile." Voss shook his head. "Phantom, every operator in this compound has baggage. Show me someone in special operations without nightmares and guilt, and I'll show you someone who hasn't been doing the job long enough. What matters is whether you're dealing with it professionally and whether you can still function when the mission requires it. Last night proved you can do both." He gestured toward the planning room. "Come on, let's get you properly integrated. We've got briefings to conduct and equipment to issue. You're going to need proper gear, not logistics hand-me-downs." The next hours passed in a blur of activity, signing for equipment and weapons, receiving briefings on current operations and threat assessments, meeting the other members of the Joint Task Force who operated alongside the SEAL team. Each introduction felt like another piece clicking into place, another step away from the person she had tried to become and back toward the operator she had always been. By late afternoon, she stood in the armory with Castellano, selecting her primary weapon system. Her hands moved over the rifles with practiced familiarity, checking weights and balance points, testing trigger pulls and sight pictures. This was the language she spoke fluently, the vocabulary of precision violence in service of protection. "This one," she said finally, selecting a rifle that felt like an extension of her body. Perfectly balanced, precisely maintained, ready for the demands she would place on it. "Good choice," Castellano approved. "Same platform I run. We'll get you zeroed tomorrow at the range." They walked back to the compound together, the setting sun painting the base in shades of orange and gold. The day was ending the way it had begun, with military routine and professional preparation. But everything felt different now, aligned with truth instead of fighting against it. That evening, the team gathered for a mission brief on potential operations in the coming weeks. Nora sat among them, contributing tactical observations and asking relevant questions, feeling herself slip back into the rhythms of operational planning. Her insights were valued, her experience respected. This was where she belonged, among people who understood the weight she carried because they carried their own. After the brief, as the team dispersed to their evening routines, Voss pulled her aside. "How are you feeling about all this?" he asked quietly. "It's been a rapid transition from logistics to combat operations." "Scared," Nora admitted. "Worried I'll make a mistake that costs lives." Concerned the nightmares will get worse now that I'm back in the fight. But also, for the first time in months, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. The nightmares might get worse, Voss said honestly. They might get better. Either way, you've got a team to help you through it. That's the difference between now and before. You're not alone with it anymore. She nodded, feeling the truth of his words. The fear was still there, the memories still sharp. But the crushing isolation of trying to handle it alone had lifted. These operators understood in ways others couldn't, shared burdens in ways that made them bearable. As night fell over the base, Nora stood outside the compound, looking toward the mountains where hours ago she had fought for her life and rediscovered her purpose. The darkness held no comfort, still carried the echoes of violence and loss. But it also held the promise of missions to come, of lives she might save, of the difference her skills could make in the hands of people who knew how to use them properly. Her radio crackled with routine traffic, operators checking in from patrol positions, aircraft reporting on station, the endless communication that kept the base secure and operational. She listened to the familiar sounds, feeling herself settle into place among them. This was her world, had always been her world, even when she tried to pretend otherwise. Phantom, Finch called from the compound door. We're watching a movie if you want to join. Something with explosions and terrible dialogue. She smiled, turning back toward the warmth and light of the compound. Be right there, she replied. Walking inside, she found the team scattered around the common area, relaxed and comfortable despite the weight of missions ahead. They made space for her naturally, including her in their banter and their silence with equal ease. This was the other side of special operations, the bonds forged between people who depended on each other absolutely, who shared burdens too heavy for individual shoulders. The movie played on the screen, explosions and heroics rendered in Hollywood fantasy. The real operators watched with amused commentary, pointing out tactical absurdities and impossible scenarios. Nora joined the laughter, feeling tension release that she had carried for too long. The nightmares would still come, the guilt would still surface. But here, among people who understood, she could face them without breaking. Later, in her new quarters assigned for operational personnel, she lay in darkness and waited for sleep. The faces of her lost teammates appeared as they always did, memories sharp and painful. But tonight, instead of drowning in guilt, she spoke to them quietly in her mind, told them she was back, that she was using the skills they had helped her develop, that she would honor their memory by bringing other operators home. The promises felt right, felt true, felt like the memorial they deserved. Sleep came eventually, and with it dreams. Some were nightmares, fragments of past missions and losses. But some were different, visions of missions ahead, of teammates, depending on her and her bringing them home safely. The balance had shifted, possibility mixing with memory, hope tempering grief. When morning came, she woke to the sound of the base coming alive, operations continuing their eternal rhythm. She dressed in her combat utilities, checking her gear with automatic precision. Today would bring training, preparation, integration with the team's tactical procedures. Tomorrow or the day after would bring a mission, a chance to prove that last night's performance wasn't luck, but capability. Walking to the compound for morning brief, she felt the weight of her rifle across her chest, the familiar presence of combat gear, the rightness of purpose aligned with truth. The path ahead held danger and difficulty, held the potential for more loss and more nightmares. But it also held the chance to make a difference, to use exceptional skills for meaningful purpose, to honor the fallen by protecting the living. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've witnessed someone reveal unexpected strength when it mattered most. She was Phantom again, operator and protector, carrying her ghosts, but no longer running from them. And somewhere in the mountains, in the valleys and compounds where violence waited, there were missions ahead that would need her skills, teams that would depend on her capabilities, lives that might be saved because she had found the courage to stop hiding from who she really was. That was enough. That had to be enough. And standing among teammates who understood the weight, She believed it finally was.